Awesome. Hello, all. I'm Shino. I'm a Yuri visual novel developer, usually director, scenario writer, and character artist. And my recent releases include some Yuri games, such as The Final Prize of Soup and Void Hyperion. I've been talking at VNConf for a couple years now. My previous talk last year was on the topic of astro reduction. But this year, I'll be talking about visual novel project management, specifically drawing from my experience leading visual novel development teams, ranging from just one person, me, to teams of up to 10 people. This talk will tell you kind of how you can front load some of your organization and general communication with your team so you can spend less time managing and more time doing actual deving. The talk makes a couple of assumptions as to what your role is. So it assumes that you are the director, producer, someone who is doing the project management for the project, and you already have an idea of what your project is going to be about. So none of that, I don't know what the game is about. So you have all that planned out already. So now you are gathering a team of people. Hopefully, you've already kind of gotten the recruitment started, and you get to the point where you need to get them onboarded and organized so the game development can just go full throttle. You don't have to spend time digging up information to get them organized. So I'll be talking about a couple topics today. Firstly, onboarding to get your teammates on board, and then how to organize all that stuff into a team hub, keep track of the information with the spreadsheet, and otherwise have all your assets organized in a easy to access way via an asset hub and also version control for your code because you definitely don't want to be uploading zip files to your Google Drive, as well as a couple of miscellaneous tips that I couldn't really quite fit into any of these categories. So first off, I will start with the topic of onboarding. So you have already identified the person you want to be your artist or your programmer, so on and so forth. But you do need to make sure that they are onboarded onto the team so they know what this game is about, which hopefully they kind of already know, and what they're going to be doing. So you want to have them know and give you the information on who they are, what they're doing, where they're doing this stuff, when they need to do it, and next steps as to what are you going to do for this game development process. With who, of course, as I mentioned, you already know this person, you want them to be on your team, but you have to make sure you still have the additional information to be able to have them on your team without needing to uh, dig out old conversations, drag them out from the void when you're almost done with the game. And it's like, wait, what do you want to be credited as on the game? So make sure you know what they want to be credited as well as some general information such as their availability and time zone. So it'll be easy for you to message them instead of having to wait like 12 hours for them to wake up because they're on the other side of the planet, as well as any payment logistics if you are doing a paid game. And if you need to do scheduling with multiple people, I recommend this tool called When to Meet, but I won't get too much into tools because I have no time to do that in 20 minutes. So next up, let's talk about the next W on the list. What? By what I mean, you should provide more high-level role scope information to the person who you've recruited. So hopefully in your recruitment, you did already give them some of this information, but you should make sure that they know how many and what items they're expected to deliver and what format they're going to deliver it in, such as do you just want the PNG or do you want the Photoshop document, so on and so forth, as well as dimensions. Since if you're making a 4K game and they give you something in 720p, it doesn't really work that well. And hopefully, you should also have specifics for specific tasks in mind. But when onboarding, it's a bit more important to have the big picture in mind and details on just the most upcoming tasks. So if you don't have everything planned out, that's okay. Just have the big picture and a couple of specific tasks that you want them to get working on in the near future planned out. So some of this information on the deliverables might include for sprites, for example, the design and references that you want your artist to use if they're not being the character designer, as well as the list of poses for the sprites and a list of expressions, so on and so forth for the other items. I'm not going to read this all out because I have no time to do that, but you can take a look at this chart over here. And next, let's talk about the next W on the list, where. So by where, I'm referring to where should your team member report progress on the work. Are you going to go through DMs and discuss there, or are you going to have a group server? So I will later talk about some group server stuff, but you should make sure that they do know where they want to have your communication. So you don't have to drag them out and be like, hey, I wanted you to talk here. And they're like, what? I thought you wanted to DM me for stuff. Nope, just make sure you have this pinpointed up front so it can go smoothly. And where can also refer to where you want to store these assets. After all, they might get your sprites done and they put it somewhere, and then you're like, hey, I don't see where they are. And then they're like, I finished that 2 weeks ago. What do you mean? So make sure you're all on the same page as to where you're talking and where you're putting these assets so you can actually use the deliverables. And for the final W, when, of course, it's awesome to just tell someone that you want them to do something, but make sure you do have a timeline in mind so then you can discuss and determine when things are going to get done, such as the overall goal for the assets, the overall timeline, the big picture, as well as kind of delivery time expectations, such as, hey, do you think it's possible for you to draw this in this amount of time? And they might tell you, oh, I would need a bit more time. So it will give you more information as to planning your project in general and keeping everything on track to get stuff done. And depending on the person, you might need to determine some check-in frequencies, such as, hey, is it okay we check in once a week, so on and so forth. But that is definitely up to the person. And now you have all these W's. Isn't that amazing? You have your team gathered and they know what to do, right? So you can just do nothing now, just let them do their stuff. No, don't do that. Make sure that they do actually have next steps in mind. So provide action items or provide a timeline on incoming action items if you're doing a jam where you can't actually get started on it yet. So you don't need to know every single task that needs to be done in detail right now, but make sure you do give them some immediate to-dos or at least immediate upcoming to-dos. And of course, again, you should give them an overall timeline and expected scope so that they know if they can actually do the job. And this will help you kind of understand what is everyone working on right now, or what is everyone supposed to be working on right now, so you can keep track of what's going on. But don't overwhelm your teammates because if you have 30 CGs that need to be done, you probably shouldn't give them a whole list of 30 CGs in your DMs. Just have things at the ready. So now you have a team. That's amazing. How are you going to organize them? Well, you can do DMs or you can do a group survey. And in this section, I will be going through why I think you should totally have a group server and how you could organize it. So it'll be in the context of Discord, and I would generally recommend having a group server that's organized into multiple channels to provide an easy point of reference for you and the team members. It's great to allow you to organize your conversations for reference, as well as allowing concurrent discussions without having other people, say, talking over each other while having conversations about the UI or the art at the same time. Very useful. And it's also a great place to just keep some information. After all, if you have a Discord server where everyone's talking, you can keep track of what's going on. Why not just drop some information in some channels like important links channels or so on and so forth? It's very useful to clearly surface information that you want everyone to be able to easily access. And it's a bit more visible than pins. But of course, if you do have pins in your tool, such as Discord, you should totally make use of them, since they are quite useful. But now you might be saying, okay, you did mention DMs. What are the pros and cons of both? Well, with group servers, I personally recommend them for the majority of development talk because they allow your team to give input onto what is going on and see what's going on. This is really great for boosting morale. And overall, it will make life a lot easier for you if you don't need to dig out DMs that might be hidden under your chats with other people and so on and so forth. But it will probably require some pinging here and there depending on the developers, as not everyone will have your Discord server pinned at the top. As for DMs, there is still a time and place for DMs. I would say typically you probably want to keep your private logistics like payments and stuff in DMs, as well as if a teammate really wants to have all the conversation in DMs, you might as well just go with DMs. But hopefully you can keep most of it in the group server so it's a lot easier for you to keep track of what's going on because it's really annoying to dig out DMs if you have to dig out DMs for 10 people. But that's all about your team organization, making sure your teammates are kind of in one place so they're all on the same track. How can you actually keep track of what is actually going on? So that's where I get to the spreadsheet. Everyone loves spreadsheets because they make you feel really productive, but you better make your spreadsheet actually productive if you're going to use a spreadsheet. So of course you can do spreadsheets in many different ways. I personally do spreadsheets this way, so I'll just give you a rundown of one way you can do spreadsheets. Uh, I would recommend having the following information in your spreadsheet. So logistical details, um, as to what your game is, kind of like the engine stuff, so on and so forth, as well as more high level, project level to-dos, as to what the progress of your game is. and then having some pages for more specific information about assets, such as asset lists with details as needed, and just kind of like what the to-dos are for that information. So you can know where is the project going as a whole, as well as where are the specific things in the project. Um, is the art at the place that we want it to be? Of course, you might have more information that is too much to put in those tiny boxes in a spreadsheet because it is kind of not great to read paragraphs in spreadsheets. So if you do have that type of stuff, try spinning up a separate document and linking it in your spreadsheet so that you can have everything in one place that's easy for you to look at. And just as a PSA, a spreadsheet is not the same thing as a Jira board. If you want to have daily scrum with your teammates, you really need to discuss that and see if your team is actually up to that because even in a day job where you have to use Jira, not everyone is going to update their stories. So let's go into an example. I don't really have any examples that I can share that are not from a jam that are filled out right now. So I will go ahead and share a jam spreadsheet example as one that's a filled out example. So as I mentioned, I generally recommend having some big picture information that's easily available in your spreadsheet to help you keep track of what's going on, and also just as a useful reference point. So for example, your game specifications. Your artist is asking you, oh, what size should I make the game? And maybe you make games in different sizes, so you don't know off the top of your head. And so you look at the spreadsheet and voila, it's on page one. It's really easy to say, oh, the game is going to be 1080p. Can you make the assets at a 2x size? So we can do some zoomies. Amazing, great. So you want to have some of this information in an easily accessible place for you to be able to reference without having to dig it out from old conversations, which is, again, as mentioned, kind of annoying and probably a waste of your time, especially if you are crunching to get something done. And you should probably also just keep track of some information that you had written down or discussed with your teammates during the onboarding period, so it's easy for you to get that information back out for when you do need to use it, such as the credits. And I typically just keep all the project level to-dos on the same page because, hey, doesn't it feel nice to have some checkboxes checked off to let you know that the game is getting done without having to go through multiple pages? But of course, I typically recommend still having the asset level information for your stuff in a spreadsheet so you can keep track of what's going on at an asset level, as well as, keeping track of some minor details here and there in the spreadsheet so it's an easy reference for both you and the artist. But if you do need additional information, consider again linking a separate document with further information if needed. Just try to keep it in a consolidated and easy to access place because you don't want to have to search through like 20 Google Docs to try to find what you're trying to give to someone. That's not fun to do. Especially if you name your documents badly, but that's another problem. And spreadsheets, being spreadsheets, are also great for planning. So if you do want to have your planning in the same document or whatever as your other stuff, it can be pretty nice to have some planning in your spreadsheets. But that is up to you and how you decide to organize and plan your game. As for another spreadsheet example, this one I will actually share a template for in the links channel, but this is to kind of discuss the topic of Jira boards, as mentioned previously. So your spreadsheet is not a Jira board. And here's another overview page, but you can keep track of similar information as, say, a Kanban board like Trello or Jira in a spreadsheet. So maybe just keeping track of what task is done and so on and so forth is not granular enough for you. What if you want to track more granular level information and things like deadlines, what the status is, or you just like clicking things off and being like, I made progress? Well, it can be nice to keep something like a backlog page in your spreadsheet, but you have to remember, again, spreadsheets are not the same as Jira boards. So as the project manager, you will have to own the maintenance of this information in a spreadsheet. So it'll only be as useful as your maintenance of it. But it can be great to keep track of, again, what you should have in mind, what is being done and by who, and of course, when it should be done. And since you are using a spreadsheet, if you're using a spreadsheet, you might want to leverage some spreadsheet functionality because it makes you feel really good when you see the numbers change, right? But just be sure that you're not spending too much time doing this. Otherwise, you might be spending more time spreadsheeting than deving, which is also not great, even though spreadsheets are great. I know spreadsheets are really great. They make me feel happy. But anyways, before I get too carried away about why spreadsheets are fun, just make sure that if you are using a spreadsheet, you're keeping your spreadsheet up to date as a valuable reference. So again, it should have stuff like what's our team? What's the scope of our project? What do we have left? And other logistical details that can help you keep the team on track without having to dig out information from who knows where in a 2-year-old document. Yeah, that's not great. But again, as I mentioned, while talking about the Jira board stuff, understand that your spreadsheet might not use the spreadsheet the same way that you do. They might use it purely as reference. They might use it fully and update it and stuff, or they might not look at it at all. But the idea is that the spreadsheet should be a useful source of truth for you to keep things on track and not have to spend too much time digging up information. So just try and encourage use, but don't get too caught up in forcing spreadsheet on your sprite artists and making them not draw your sprites because you really want those sprites to be done, but the spreadsheet's a little second to that. So, but spreadsheets are just information. You actually do want your stuff to be somewhere so you can put it in game, right? You want the pretty girls and the CGs and the music and so on and so forth. So this section will now talk about how you might want to organize your assets. Generally, I would recommend having an asset hub of some sort, such as Google Drive, so for cloud backups, and try to organize it in similar ways to your spreadsheet or your team hub with things such as folders by subject, surfacing high-level importance items, such as maybe your key visual or the spreadsheet. And make sure that you're not actually storing code in this asset hub, Google Drive, because that will be very painful for you later on. But even if you do have this hub as a place where you tell your team to put the stuff in, make sure that what they are delivering for you is something that's usable by your other teammates. So this is hopefully stuff that you discussed in the onboarding as to what format they're going to deliver it in. But here are some tips as to what you should really keep in mind as far as that format information for the various disciplines addressed in the visual novel. So your writer should know stuff like what engine the game is in and write the thing in a format that's reasonable to use in the coding and scripting process. So if you're writing a RenPy game, hopefully they are writing it in a RenPy friendly format. But honestly, if they want to write the story on clay tablets, as long as they give the output to the programmer in a form that's not a pain too important to the engine, like honestly, just go ahead. But it's really important to make sure that the format is a usable format, especially if co-writing, since co-writing you might even have variables that are shared and so on and so forth. So it'll be really annoying to try to put it together if not only do you have to edit it to make sure all the writing is cohesive, but you also make sure that the variables match up. No, 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 that's not good. But make sure that you're not micromanaging this either because again, as long as they give it to you in a format that's usable by the programmer and the other teammates who need to use it, all is well. They can do the previous parts in however way they want to do. But know that you might be working with folks that are unfamiliar with the tool you're using. So I think most people here probably have used RenPy, but if you're using Nanny Novel or something, maybe someone hasn't used Nanny Novel before and they don't know the syntax. So I would recommend making sure that you do give resources to your folks as to how you want their format to be if they are unfamiliar with the format or you believe that they might be unfamiliar. So giving them a template or just some sort of style guide as to how to write RenPy style and so on and so forth. Especially if you want to have things like end ifs or mark out certain endings and so on and so forth. Similarly, if you need like the variable information for co-writing. Um, but yeah, as long as you're writing in a usable format, your programmer will probably be pretty happy. And they might even be happier if you give them notes as to what the staging is, but that's another problem. But similar things apply to the graphics. So UI, sprites, CGs, backgrounds, so on and so forth. Because, again, like I mentioned, if they're giving you something that's tiny and you need something big, that's not great. But overall, the artist should know, again, like similar information to what the writer should know. So game resolution, delivery format, and other visual novel specific details. This is especially the case because even if your sprite art is not totally new to VNs, you might want to do live 2D, and live 2D is gonna need a lot more finagling with those layers than a typical layered image VN sprite is gonna be. Or maybe your artist has certain opinions on wanting or not wanting to give you working files. So with character art, I've generally expected to get working files like PSDs, while with UI art, I would say that many programmers expected to be pre-exported with some sort of mockups for them. So you do need to make sure that you have all of this delivery information hashed out with the folks. So then the assets are passed along to the next person in line in a usable format. And for a lot of artists, you also need to have references too. So make sure, again, with the easily accessible stuff, that you do provide all this stuff in an easy to access location, such as a labeled folder in your asset hub or pinned messages in your art channel, so on and so forth. But depending on how much you need to update it, you might want to consider having both if you're not updating often, or having only one if you do need to update it a lot. And finally, music. So honestly, I know a lot less about music than the other parts. But again, the musician should know stuff about the engine, the format of delivery. So RemPy will probably not take some rando music format that you never heard of before, but it'll take stuff like OGG. So make sure that they are delivering it in a format that actually works in your engine, as well as just general details on what you expect. And hopefully you ask the musician for information such as track looping, especially if your music is split up with intro then looping segments. So then by the time you're putting into the game, you can actually put into the game and not have to be like, hey, I know you finished this thing like 6 months ago, but do you remember what the timestamps are? Yeah, that's not great because they might not remember, and then you have to go digging for it, and that's not fun. You just want to be able to put your stuff into the engine and make your game. And speaking of putting things into engine, the code is probably the first thing you're putting into engine, unless you like uploading your assets into engine first. I don't know. But with code, again, like I mentioned, I recommend not keeping it in your asset hub like Google Drive, but to keep it in a place like Git for version control. So this part, I will be talking about using GitHub as the Git service, but you can use other things. And in general, Git is great because it kind of serves as like a cloud backup for your code if you're using GitHub and so on, and it keeps track of your changes, allows you to do concurrent work so people don't have to wait for other people to finish coding, and also allows you to do stuff like code review and so on and so forth. But I think the most important thing is that it keeps you from having to do like final two bug fix today in the morning done for real.zip. Oh, I'm not done yet. Add another zip file. That is really not fun. You just want to let your programmers program and not have to deal with all this Google Drive zip file uploading. Terrible. So you might be thinking, well, that sounds great, but I'm not a programmer. It sounds kind of intimidating. And sure, like as the project manager, director, so on and so forth, you don't necessarily need to be involved in the programming stuff. So if you really don't want to deal with that, technically you can just download a zip file if you go to the GitHub page and click code and then downloads it. And then everything will be fine. You can just run it in RenPy. But if you do want to take some time and get into it, or you're also the programmer because most of the time the director wears multiple hats, then I will really quickly go through how to use Git. So there's two main ways to use it. One is in terminal and one is in UI. So firstly, I'll quickly go through terminal, and with terminal, you can really do the whole thing in VS Code, which I'm assuming most people here are using, unless they're using some other IDE, which probably also has similar things going on. So open the terminal and then install Git. Well, installing Git, I'm not going to go through that entire process because GitHub has a great guide to do it. But firstly, you install Git, and then you use the GitHub UI to make a repo, which is great. And then they give you all this gibberish, and it's like, what is this? I don't know. So you can either just copy paste the things that they have here into your terminal, or you can clone your repo down and then copy paste these things into your terminal, which is great, right? I don't know. And additionally, you'll want to grab something called the gitignore file, which you can steal from the RenPy GitHub repo, I don't know. And right now I will ask Python if maybe you can add like GitHub type jazz into the create new RenPy project output, kind of like how web app bootstrappers do that, but I don't know. Maybe that already exists and I just haven't updated RenPy to the newest version. But now you're kind of like, what are we talking about? Lots of Git commands. Yes, there are lots of Git commands. And it might get a little intimidating, but overall, your entire workflow can basically be this. You run your clone and setup stuff, and then every time you make a change, you just run git add dot, git commit m, which is kind of like, this is the description of what I've been working on, and then git push whatever branch you're working on, and hopefully you're using branches, but honestly, you can probably get away with only doing main, which is the default thing that they have set up for you already. And just remember to pull often because there's something called a merge conflict that you don't want to deal with probably if you're not a programmer and you have no idea how to use Git. So just keep pulling and then you probably will need to deal with this. And now you're like, wow, terminal sounds terrible. And I don't know, I like terminal, but there are lots of UI options that are a lot more, I guess, easy to get into if you've never done terminal stuff before. So if you follow the GitHub link to the guides for setup, there are some setups for using VS Code. And VS Code basically makes the entire thing into a UI interface on the IDE. So if you really hate the terminal, I recommend using VS Code integration. It's very convenient. But anyways, I already spent too much time on this Git stuff. So before I wrap up, I'm gonna cover two miscellaneous tips on this, on I guess project management and I guess the role of the director. Firstly, try not to freak out your teammates by saying hi. Just tell them what you want from them when you message them. Maybe you can be more casual than this, but just make sure that you do tell them what they want. Tell them what you want from them rather than freaking them out, saying hi. It's like, do they want to fire me? No. Yeah, don't do that. And also, as a director, you are in charge of basically all of the odd jobs. So you need to make sure that you're assigning the tasks, reviewing the submissions that you're getting, delegating, and probably doing all the project management stuff that I talked about. But overall, to keep your game on track and not have to spend too much time digging stuff out to do management and making sure people are on track, you should just make sure you have all this information on what to do, where to do, when to do, and clear action items. And hopefully keeping a source of truth, like a spreadsheet and all those hubs, so it's easy for you to find what you need to do. And you don't have to spend like 10 hours finding information that you should already have. And yeah, if there's still extra break time, I kind of want to keep blabbing and maybe demo the basic Git workflow. But first, I will ask for questions. Thank you for listening.
All right, hold on. So I am going to shove the schedule after this, just because Apple needs to go somewhere after. So we have a couple minutes, like 5 minutes. So we'll put some questions in there, and then after, I don't think we're gonna have time for Git though, unless people don't have any questions. And after that, we'll put Apple and then go through with the rest of the schedule with a certain amount of delay. At this point, the time means nothing at this point. So.
I forgot to start my timer.
Yeah, you just crammed an entire, essentially a course on like management stuff in 20 minutes, so, or 20 something minutes. So yeah, that's pretty amazing. And you convinced someone to put Git into their VS Studio right now.
Yay.
Yay, success.
Use Git, don't upload zip files.
What my dot final v2 slash I really mean it doesn't work anymore. Oh yeah, Phoenix is oh yeah, and Git and adding Git ignore to the default projects. Oh, that'll be cool. All right. So since we have 2 minutes left and we're going to crash the schedule, how about Apple, you get your stuff set up so that we can go double check. Hopefully your audio is working this time and nothing blows up.
Sounds good. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. So
Okay,
now the
cool.
tricky part is the video.
Okay, I've actually joined on 2 separate devices just in case.
All right.
And yeah, and I have my video ready.
Okay. Let's give it a try.
Okay.
And then hopefully you can still hear me when you play it.
Okay. So let's see if I can share just iMovie. All right. And then can you see that?
I see iMovie with the 2 panels and everything.
Okay. And then how about now?
Oh, it went to a frame buffer or something because we can't see that. It's
Okay.
like playing, but it's like doing, yeah.
Okay, so I think I'm going to have to share the whole screen if I want to do full screen iMovie. Let's try that. All right. And then let's try this.
Oh, okay. So I see just the Google form thing.
Okay, and that's cool. That's I didn't want to be switching back and forth between iMovie and a PowerPoint, so I put a short clip of the Google screen into iMovie.
Perfect. And I can still hear you, so everything is functioning. So I will let you take it away.